beings called the Titans, and they created the world and created the species out of rock and stone and bronze, and then of course they became flesh, and it's so cool how things that today are so etched in Tolkien and Lovecraftian and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I found in 4900 is when they freed Melkor from his 3-age sentence. And 10 years later, he begins to corrupt some of the Noldoran elves. And then in 4949 is when Feanor begins to make the Silmarils.
Correct.
So, let's see. And then he completes the forging of the Silmarils in 4950, which were, again, they were magic stones created to capture the light of stars and sought after by everybody. I think everybody wanted one.
Yes, correct. And then ultimately it led to war.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you get into it's all culminating. We're trying to get to the Children of Hurin, where they actually come in.
By the way, let's be clear. We have not gotten to Children of Hurin yet.
No, we haven't even got there yet. That's the amazing thing about Tolkien's work.
And by the way, we are being pretty, we're taking some liberties here, and we're still not at Children of Hurin yet.
Yeah, we're jumping over huge chunks of things that happen. I mean, there is so much. Yeah. The carving out of the Elven kingdoms and where they put them all, and all the Elven kings.
Yeah, and the elves that made the long journey, and then they split into basically, not tribes, but two groups, and some of them didn't make the journey and stopped along the way and populated other portions of Middle-earth.
The birth of great lords like Fingolfin, Luthien, Finarfin, everybody's got a Fin. The great elf lords that do play huge roles in, or at least roles in, Children of Hurin.
And there's like a class system with the elves too. You got your high elves, and then you've got your lower level like Sylvan like forest elves, and they consider like the gray elves, I believe, are the highest. Right? They are like the direct descendants of,
I think that's right,
the original populace of Middle Earth or something. And they've kind of there's different. I don't know how they've separated. It tells how they kind of split off in the book. We have the Sindarans, and then you have the Noldorans, and I can't remember if there was a third race of elves, but there's definitely a hierarchy amongst the elves that they follow.
I mean, you look at elves. You look at the Wood Elves, the Legolas, his father, that clan, and then you kind of look at Galadriel, and you can tell the difference between the two elves or the two tribes of elves, as you would, and how they kind of existed.
Yeah, and it's kind of has to do with their background and how long they've been around, where they came from, how ancient they are, from what time in Middle Earth. They kind of determines their hierarchy, I guess. But Galadriel was actually,
and where they settled, like during the migration of the elves, like where they settled, or did they go the full distance on that journey, or did they stop?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Galadriel
was actually born before the Silmarils were made, according to
4862. Yep, 4862. Galadriel was born. So Cate Blanchett ages well.
Yes,
but she has a lot to do with like a lot of the throughout the ages of Middle Earth. Galadriel is a very important figure, to the point where she's been around so long that later on the orcs and all the kind of evil species call her the White Witch, or they won't go near her. Part of the world. They don't even want to be anywhere near it.
I mean, if you really think about it, Galadriel's one of the most powerful of all the elves on Middle Earth when it gets to that point. And that's why with the temptation of the ring, she knew that if she had taken the ring, she would be raging hormone bitch.
Yeah, and by the way, when you see her in that kind of witchy, almost visual form during that moment with Frodo in Fellowship, and and this is fun to talk about, one of the joys of, if you can get into the Silmarillion and get into Children of Hurin, is realize how these things play out when you rewatch Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. Then you see, wow, like that scene has a whole different context when you realize how old Galadriel is.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
And how powerful.
There's a whole other appreciation. If you've read these, and then you've seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then you've seen the Hobbit movies, if you've read the books, they're definitely way more. They're enhanced. Your experience is enhanced by just knowing some of the background.
Yeah.
Of maybe something that they just only maybe mentioned. Just like I said, it was a big deal to me when Galadriel says servant of Melkor. That to me is a big throwing in implied history stuff like that. I love that.
Yeah.
And just seeing just seeing how others, how much respect and kind of intimidation even Gandalf has when she's near, and even Elrond. Even Elrond has this kind of, she's here, I'm kind of,
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. She's here.
She's his mother-in-law, right? That's the
yeah. Well, that too. Mother-in-law came to visit. Oh boy.
Right.
Oh boy. Yeah, your daughter gave up her last life to live with a human. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Should have raised her better. But Galadriel just so much, and I love Cate Blanchett in that role. I think that was perfect casting with her. She just played it
for sure.
And that's one of the things I loved was, especially when Peter Jackson came back and did the Hobbit films, was seeing the White Council in the battles.
Yeah.
And going to get the necromancer, those things that you didn't really see too much in the Hobbit, but were played out in other stories and other books. I loved that so much.
No, totally.
One of the things I find pretty fascinating about Tolkien is how he evolved Middle Earth over all these ages. Like you get into some of the Silmarillion stuff is so metaphysical and weird and biblical almost in the forming of the world. Then you've got all this really like weird magic and just archaic old ways and the way and it just seems to form later on throughout the story. You start to see the age of man come about and technology and like an industrial age start to come about. Third age comes around. And the whole world kind of evolves from the Silmarillion all the way through the Hobbit, where magic's starting to leave Middle Earth. It's just the beginning of it leaving with Smaug the dragon dying, and and the magic is starting to leave. And this industrialization of Middle Earth. And then as Sauron's coming to power and this kind of dark entities rising in the east. And it's amazing how by the end of that, and then the earth is kind of given unto man at the end of Lord of the Rings. It's kind of, this is now the age of man, and magic is now gone. The elves are leaving, and this is, and then you can kind of take that, and then this is our world maybe from way back then. It kind of.
Well, I was going to say, so are we basically fourth age? I mean, I guess that's what we're saying.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the intention. That's how I always took it. Like after the last elves left Middle Earth, then it's like basically us. Our timeline starts there. The Age of Man came about, and the Industrial Age, and the Hobbits kind of disappeared into the background. And it even says something, and I think in the appendices to Lord of the Rings, it talks about there are still hobbits in the world today. They just stay hidden because they're good at hiding, and some of the magical creatures just kind of retreated back to the earth.
But they even mentioned, that the hobbits were becoming more man-like because, you looked at, Merry and Pippin were taller than Frodo, and they were, even I think Merry was taller than Pippin, or they even said that the hobbits were gradually getting more height on them as the generations went on.
So is this actually an argument for sort of an evolutionary streak?
I think Tolkien knew. I think Tolkien got a hold of some ancient tome, put it in his own words, and we've never.
He might have. Like fairy stories were big. He was a connoisseur of fairy tale stories, and going back and researching.
I think the only one that would know
English
for sure,
European folk tales.
The only one that would know for sure would be Christopher. He would be the next one that would have been past this ancient tome of the world. Would be Christopher.
Yes, it's kind of like the book in.
He's got the red. Yeah, he's got the great book. He's got the book.
Yeah,
it's real.
Because Sam passed it on to his children. Because Bilbo passed it to Frodo. Frodo passed it to Sam. Sam passed it to his children throughout the line. And Tolkien came along because he's a descendant of Frodo and Bilbo, and now Christopher has it. That's what I'm thinking. Is Tolkien is a distant relative of the Baggins clan. Even his name, Tolkien. That could be that's a Hobbit name.
It's a good one.
It's a good Hobbit name. It's like Proudfeet.
His maps and stuff too. It's mind blowing the amount of detail that went into Middle Earth to begin with, and to have created it, to even thought out how the world began is just blows my mind. That's why I don't think there's anybody that, for me personally, everybody's going to argue with me. Everybody loves Game of Thrones, whatever. For me, there's no better fantasy author ever than Tolkien. I think he's always going to be my top favorite.
Well, it's like I told you, Game of Thrones. There are some magical elements into it,
right?
For the most part, the Game of Thrones is more a book about political power struggle.
Yes,
that's. See, I'm not really aware of it. I just every time I mention Tolkien, I'm always getting George Martin thrown at me back. It's almost can't get away from the comparison of the two in discussions with people.
But what have I told you? I have explained it to you succinctly. Martin is, first of all, Martin is, and I'll say this: I have listened to all the Game of Thrones books because trying to read it, Martin is so descriptive on like he has to tell you every little thing in the room, like how many bricks are in a room before you get to meat and potatoes. So I had to listen to it. But like I said, where the Game of Thrones is basically all political power struggle. It's
right.
Everybody wants this throne. Yeah, there's dragons, there's White Walkers, but it's more who is going to be on the throne. Yeah. Who's going to run these kingdoms? They talk about the kingdoms owe debt to the Iron Bank of Bravos, and it's very political. The people just want to say that because that's the in thing right now.
Right.
Nothing beats Tolkien. And we've got, I mean, all of Tolkien's stuff is right here, and we're still getting new Tolkien writings.
Yeah.
Martin, as much as I like his writing, takes 7 years to finish a freaking book. We've been waiting on Winds of Winter for ever, to the point the show should never catch up with the books.
Right, but it did.
But it did, and now you're going to read the book, and you're going to go. I said this is the first time you're going to read a book and go, but wait, this didn't happen in the show. Usually, you're like, this didn't happen in the book. No, this didn't happen in the show. What are you talking about? Yeah, because he's like, it's like, okay, the show will have been finished. We're going to finish out the show, and we're still not going to get the next book. George R.R. Martin has taken about as much time as Malcor was in prison.
Yes, 3 ages.
3 ages to write a book.
Back when there wasn't just one Balrog. And by the way, can we just talk about for a second? First Age, there are multiple Balrogs running around. Yes. You don't just have one. You get to have multiple Balrogs, which is a terrifying prospect.
They have names. Gothmog is the leader as the king of all Balrogs, I believe. And then there's several other ones they mentioned. There's more than one dragon too. You have Glaurung the Golden Worm. And you have several other, which, by the way, Glaurung has got to be the creepiest dragon. Way worse than Smaug ever was.
Yeah.
Just psychologically terrifying, this dragon. He uses brute strength, and he's murderous, and he eats people, and he burns places down. But he also will mess with your mind so bad, will screw your life up with his magic, and for no other reason but to wait till you realize that he did it to you at the end, and to just laugh in your face. And that is for no other reason. He's just pure evil, and by far my favorite dragon in the history of Middle-earth.
For sure. I'm with you on that.
So there was 3 maiden Balrogs, many dragons. Like you said, Glaurung, Ancalagon the Black.
Right.
Yes.
Morgoth bred him during the first stage of Middle-earth.
Yep.
Scatha, the Lord of the Long Worm of the Grey Mountains.
Right.
Then, of course, Smaug.
I'm
fat and lazy.
not clear. I've read some other on the dragons of Middle-earth, and they say that a lot of they were all created by Morgoth, but some of them, like Ungoliant did, some of them took on and decided they didn't want to serve Morgoth, and they wanted to be independent. And some of them weren't even necessarily evil. Some of them just crawled off away and hid themselves in the world away from Morgoth and didn't participate in any of this. Yeah. And I think some of them were actually even good-natured and helpful, and they were just the species. And maybe it's because he just took the most terrifying and powerful and sent them out to cause destruction and didn't pay much attention to the smaller, less lethal ones he created. I don't know how that works, but it's weird how some of the creatures that they seem to have a certain amount of autonomy to decide for themselves what they want to be, which would kind of maybe also explain the weird kind of half goblin guy that Frodo encounters at the prancing pony in the books.
Yes,
but it's strange.
They even say at some point Smaug is, he has his treasure, And that was basically what he wanted. He didn't want anything else. He had his treasure. He was happy just to be in his little treasure trove.
Yeah, it was basically a servant of Sauron.